how nice guys in the book, and I think you said it in this conversation, have shame around sexuality in
Yeah.
particular. And I don't know how many very young men you've talked to, like the Gen Z, but it seems that it's gotten even intensified. So I've like the fear of rejection, of approach,
Yeah.
of all of that is at such a level that is stunning to even me, because the worst thing that happened in my time, you go up and it was a private shame that maybe some of the people in the room saw that you approached her and it
Yeah.
didn't go well. Now there's a incentive to put it on the internet. And this guy came up and said this thing and it was so creepy and so weird or whatever. And so there's this fear that I've seen in like 23
Yeah.
year olds and younger that is beyond anything I experienced. And so I'm curious, like, it sounds like our society is adding to that, the tendency at which people might have this issue and this syndrome crop up in their life. I'm curious if you've seen that.
Yeah. I'm thinking of several different ways to come at
Hmm.
this. Let's talk about sexual shame for a minute,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then let's come back to that piece. Um, we live in a culture that just bombards everybody with sexual shame.
Hmm.
American culture is still very puritanical. Sex is evil, sex is sinful. Without getting into a political debate, why is prostitution, why is two adults agreeing to a sexual contract a crime? Right? That's
Hmm.
only a crime, not because it's criminal behavior. It's a crime because of religious influences that's lingered on. That's just an example of how religious influence around sex being evil. I grew up in fundamental Christian church. I actually have 2 degrees in religion. I was a minister for 8 years. I was taught sex is dirty, evil, and sinful, so save it for the one you love. So, okay. But at the same time, we live in a culture that bombards us with sexual stimuli. Movies, commercials, music, videos, everything is sexualized. Social media, everything is sexualized. But we're still told you're bad. You're bad for being a
Hmm.
sexual person. So pretty much everybody in most cultures internalize a fair amount of sexual shame. One of the things that I do in a lot of my workshops is I ask people, think back to your first sexual memory. And, this could be anything. It could be for boys, their first erection, first wet dream,
Hmm.
first kiss, first I showed you mine, you show me yours, first abuse. It
Hmm.
could be whatever comes to mind. And then I ask people, all right, whatever that was, your first wet dream, first kiss, first time somebody touched your genitals, you touched genitals, whatever, was it in the open? Could you talk about it? Could you go tell your parents about it? Did it feel good? And could, hey, this is great. I said, could you go tell your parents and they say, that's fantastic. Let's go get pizza because that's a developmental milestone you just passed.
Hmm.
No, everybody, 100% of people say, no, first sexual memory I have, it was hidden. It was secretive. I didn't tell anybody. I thought I was bad. I thought I was going to get in
Yeah.
trouble. And then if you cross that with, and it felt good,
Hmm.
that's where then you get sexuality, the pleasure of sexuality gets crosswired with guilt and shame and secrecy and badness and punishment. And most of us then go through adolescence, because this happens before adolescence for most of us, with that crosswiring of sex being crosswired to hidden, secretive, shameful, bad stuff that just gets, it just gets compounded into adulthood. So most people reach adulthood, with most of our sexuality hidden and repressed and not particularly in the open. Then when we have social media, we have the hashtag Me Too, we've got that if a guy does anything that any woman feels any degree of discomfort with, it must have been abusive. It must have been violating. And I'm not trying to be dismissive because
Hmm.
a lot of people do some pretty violating things. So I'm not trying to be dismissive. But what happens is if every little boy thinks I'm going to get called out if I do anything wrong, I don't know about you, but I remember, you know, taking a girl to a movie on a date. I'm inexperienced. I'm maybe 15. And, I don't know what you do at a movie on a date other than, she seems to like me and I seem to like her. And so I put an arm around her till my arm falls asleep because I don't think I can move it. And, maybe you kind of reach out and see if you can touch the side of her breast and see that does she have any reaction to that. I guess that's how maybe most people kind of did it. And nowadays, I think that would be, like evil, totally
Mm,
off limits. Now I'm also a big fan, especially with older teens and adults when you are being overtly sexual, have a conversation, about, about STDs, about protection, about pregnancy, about what this act means to people, and don't do it drunk. I tell guys
mm,
all the time, do not have sex if you or she are drunk, because it's opening all kind of a pain.
mm,
Now, if you're in a long-term relationship and the two of you both agreed you like being high or being drunk while having sex, that's fine. But early, no, don't do that, because there's so many things. You know, a woman can say, I was drunk, and the next thing I know, he did that, and the guy's
mm.
going, no, wait a minute, you were doing this and touching me, but it's her word. So yeah, boys do get really, really uncomfortable with that, and the only answer I have is probably not a workable answer. Um, I tell young men all the time, nobody ever does it, is get off social media.
Mm,
Um, I think social media, number one, is very feminizing. Anything that gets you concerned about likes and having a lot of followers and people this,
mm.
that's all feminine. And
That's very
I'll
interesting.
ask guys, after you've been on social media doing this, how productive do you feel afterwards? How productive does social media make you?
And
Productivity.
how attached to yourself do you feel? I mean,
Yeah.
you attached probably to like who you might be for other people, or what you could do, what you could take a photo of, or like, yeah, but how much of that own, if you were to just sit for a full day out in nature and think about what you wanted to make or feel what you wanted to make, it probably is very far away from where you are after a couple hours
Doom scrolling.
scrolling.
And I,
Yeah.
I've never liked social media since,
Hmm.
20 years ago, when, clients, Robert, you need to get on Facebook. You need to get on Facebook. I said, no, I don't. No, I don't. I've
Mm,
been on Facebook. I've been on Instagram, X. Or actually, I've never been on Instagram, but on Twitter, now X.
mm,
Years ago, I I never saw any value in them. The only value I can see in anything on social media is like Facebook groups. Like when I
mm.
bought an older Mercedes, I found a Facebook group.
You made some,
When I found
yeah,
it
yeah,
when I bought an RV, I found a Facebook group. But I don't like Facebook because Mark Zuckerberg steals all your data. So
yeah.
I I'm not on social media, and because of that, I don't worry near as much of what people might say about me. I know,
Sure.
highly respect Jordan Peterson, but he's like on social media all the time, and he's always in a battle, always in a battle, always in a
And
battle.
it's had an impact on him.
It has,
It has taken him away, in my opinion, from his best work.
yeah.
The reactivity to, I said this on Twitter, they did this to me because of what I said on Twitter, is like, God, go take the years that it takes to come up with some of those books and insights and ideas that to me, that was the most interesting, valuable part of what he did, not the culture
Yeah.
war stuff.
So, and again, that's just my opinion. I highly respect him. I've been
Hmm.
interviewed by his daughter. I mean, I love the
Sure.
work that he
Similar.
does.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know that's going to solve any, 12, 14, 15-year-old boy's problem is getting completely off social media.
Hmm.
But I don't know. I don't have any other great ideas, other than, because I teach men, don't be cautious, don't hold back. I teach men, blurt, act on impulse, touch, tease, tell, be very interactive. But
Hmm.
again, I'm mainly teaching men that haven't grown up in the last 10 to 15 years of the school system, where anything that's offensive to anybody is abuse.
Yeah.
And I don't actually have an answer for the way through that.
So, okay, so we already had this issue with sexual shame, and now what we're saying is, yeah, it's going to get layered on, perhaps even more, and the experiences of feeling liberated, free in interactions, especially early in your life, are going to be very few and far between for young people. So, how do we unwire that sexual shame, where it's, it was a secretive thing that I
Yeah.
never talked about, all this, and it felt good? If I look at my own self, I see, wow, it's only, again, recently that I'm realizing the level of disconnection to my body that I'll have in a sexual
Yeah.
experience. So how do we work on unwiring that, coming back and not having that shame be such an integral part of what we connect with those experiences.
Okay. Let me approach this twofold, because there might be a piece that actually can also help that previous question, but they're
Sure.
very much related. One of the things I say in No More Mr. Nice Guy is don't try to do this alone. Don't try to break free from nice guy syndrome on your own. You didn't become a nice guy in social isolation. You won't break free in social isolation. I began what I call my recovery journey by going to a 12-step group for sexual addiction. I, quickly realized I wasn't a sex addict. I wasn't having enough sex to be a sex addict. Even I wanted to have sex with my wife, and she kept saying, "You're a sex addict." I go, "Well, we had a lot of sex before we got married. Now we don't." So I went.
Can I pause you for 1 second? I think that is such a common frame that occurs with nice guys, which is at least what I thought my problem was. And what the actual problem was. I was like, if only I could be more receptive to feedback from other people, that would solve everything. And it's similar to what you're describing. Is I thought that I was this pushy sex addict, and what I was in was a marriage where we weren't connecting at that level. I find that so fascinating, and I think deeply true for a lot of people.
And I'm so grateful for it, because I landed in a 12-step group for sex addicts. Quickly learned I wasn't a sex addict, but it was all guys. So it was my first men's group, and most of them needed to be there. They had some gnarly shit going on. And I'd share, and they'd probably go, "Thanks for sharing, Robert. Why are you here?" But for the first time in my life, I came aware of what toxic shame was and what it felt like to start revealing it. And in the process, to speak it out loud and to go through that cathartic experience, and to get feedback from people, they had no judgment of me, and then didn't think I was bad. Around that time, I also started working with a therapist, a woman therapist. I'd go to my 12-step group and reveal stuff I'd never revealed to anybody. Again, remember, I grew up in fundamental Christian church, critical, angry father, angry feminism of the 60s. I had plenty of shame tucked down there. I'd go to a therapist and I'd put stuff out. She goes, "Well, let's explore that, see what it means." I go, "Oh, you're not shocked?" No. I got into a men's group and, just kept doing that work. So the only way I know to really do the deep work around sexual shame is to do it with other safe people. It'd be great if you could do it on your own. Journal writing can be helpful. You can do some dream work. Maybe you can probably do some stuff, but you really do have to go be around people where you reveal things you don't want to reveal and release what you've been hiding. Find out that the people don't all have nervous breakdowns, and that they actually give you more accurate affirmations. I remember, I'll just give this as an example. My second wife, who said, "You need to go get into therapy," because prior to being married, she liked having sex. On her honeymoon, she said, "Now that we're married, aren't you glad we don't have to pretend to like sex anymore?" I said, "Wait a minute, I wasn't pretending." So about 2 years later, I acted out. She says, "You need to go get help." So I went and got help. And something came up after I was already going to this 12-step group, working with a therapist, and it was a sexual impulse. And it was kind of a dark sexual impulse, and it scared me. I didn't act on it, but in the past, I would have just pushed that way down, even from my own kind of consciousness. And so I went to my 12-step group and I shared it. I just said, "Thanks for sharing, Robert." And, okay, that wasn't bad. I went to my therapist and I shared it. She said, "Well, let's kind of explore and see what that's about." I said, "Okay, wasn't bad." So I'm driving home and I'm thinking, all right, I'm batting 1,000, 2 for 2. I need to go tell my wife this. And I used to tell my wife her middle name ought to be Overreact, because that's what she did in every situation. She never actually overreacted to that because she knew it was true. I went home, told her exactly the impulse I'd had, that I told it to my 12-step group, I told it to my therapist, and I told it to her. And she looked at me and she said, "That kind of concerns me, doesn't surprise me, and thank you for telling me." And she never brought it up again. And I thought, wow, how come no one told me this a long time ago, that you can actually find safe people, go reveal the things you think make you a bad person, that make you ugly, evil, sinful, not good enough. Go reveal it, get positive feedback. Then you can start revealing that through word, action, just how you live, to everybody else on the planet. And realize not everybody's going to think you're amazing, but you're not going to be near as offensive to near as many people as you think you are. That's when we
Yeah.
get to be real, and people get to respond to that realness. That to me, that's what what charisma is. You're being
Mm.
you. You're not holding anything you about you, but you have to go do that in a safe place.
If you want to go deeper on this, more confidence, more charisma, and how to show up in a way that has presence in every area of your life, we've built a program that will help you do exactly that. Here's what one student had to say. I went from this very weird person who missed social cues to this guy that could keep a conversation going and make people laugh. The course is called Charisma University. It's had tens of thousands of students go through it, 30 days long, fully guaranteed. If you don't think it was worth it, you get a refund right from inside the program. There's a link on the screen here and in the description. I hope you decide to check it out.